So you sit down at your computer, you type out a question, and just a few seconds later, an AI writes back something that sounds incredibly thoughtful, wonderfully nuanced, and sometimes even downright brilliant. When you experience that firsthand, it genuinely feels like there is a mind on the other side of the screen. It just feels alive, you know? Okay, let's dive into this because what is actually happening behind that chat window is going to completely change how you view this technology. Even if you use these tools every single day, diving into the actual mechanical architecture completely changes how you interact with it. In this explainer, we're going to unpack the reality of how these AI chatbots actually work. By the time we're finished today, you are going to possess a solid foundational understanding of the mechanics behind the interface. It's a perspective that absolutely demystifies the magic of it all.
I want you to hold on to that initial feeling for a second, that powerful illusion of a digital brain pondering your question. Because the reality of what's happening inside the chatbot is actually much simpler and honestly far more fascinating than the sci-fi idea of a conscious digital mind. There is no sentient being sitting in a server room reading your prompts. There's no entity understanding your words in the way that you or I do. What we're actually dealing with here is an architecture built entirely on probabilities. It's a system mathematically designed to perfectly mirror us. So let's strip away the science fiction for a bit and look at the actual mechanics of the machine.
Everything we are going to talk about today builds on this single foundational idea. At its absolute core, an AI language model is nothing more than a prediction machine. That is literally its one and only job. When you give it some text, it doesn't sit back and ponder the philosophical meaning of what you just wrote. Instead, it asks itself one relentless, repeating question. Given everything that has been written so far, what word most likely comes next? Then it adds that word. And then it asks the exact same question again, and again, and again. Word by single word, it builds its response. It is not reasoning its way to a conclusion. It is mathematically predicting an incredibly likely continuation of your conversation. To really ground this concept, think about the autocomplete feature you use every day on your smartphone. You type, "I'm running a little," and your phone instantly suggests late. The AI is essentially the world's most sophisticated version of that exact same feature. But there is a monumental difference in scale here. While your phone is just guessing your next word based on a tiny, limited bit of data from your personal texting habits, this AI is drawing on patterns it learned from an almost unimaginable amount of text. It's playing the exact same game as your phone's autocomplete, for sure, but it's playing it at a level of complexity that frankly defies human comprehension.
So you might be wondering, how exactly did it learn to predict so incredibly well? Well, before you ever had your first conversation with it, the AI went through a massive, computationally exhausting process called training. During this phase, it was shown a colossal amount of written text. We are talking millions of books, articles, websites, entire lifetimes worth of human conversations. Its task during this time was simple but absolutely unrelenting. Step 1, predict the next hidden word in the text. Step 2, check if it guessed correctly. Step 3, mathematically adjust itself to do just a little bit better next time. It did this billions upon billions of times. And as it repeated this process at an enormous scale, it absorbed the patterns of our grammar, our facts, our reasoning, and how our ideas connect. It never memorized the internet. Actually, think of it more like it learned the statistical shape of human language. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how the machine physically adjusts itself. Inside the model are these adjustable values called parameters. I want you to visualize them as billions of tiny, microscopic dials. Training is simply the process of slowly tuning all of those dials so that the model's predictions get slightly more accurate with every single pass. Nobody's in a lab setting these dials by hand, right? That would take thousands of lifetimes. The tuning happens completely automatically through the relentless repetition of that training process we just talked about. These parameters act as the mechanical memory of all those statistical patterns. And we really have to pause and emphasize the staggering scale of this. We are talking about billions, and in the newer models, even trillions of these tiny dials. This massive number is exactly what puts the large in large language models. When researchers say a model is bigger or more powerful, they literally just mean it has more of these parameters. More dials mean the system has a much higher capacity to capture incredibly subtle, nuanced patterns in human language. It is the sheer brute force volume of these parameters that allows the AI to predict the next word correctly across virtually every topic humans have ever bothered to write about. But here is the catch. Raw prediction alone would give you a very strange, almost unusable assistant. Think about it. A pure prediction machine trained on the open internet might take your simple question and respond with 5 more questions, or it might just ramble endlessly, because, well, that's what likely text sometimes looks like out in the wild west of the internet. So there's a second, absolutely critical stage. After the initial training, the model goes through a refinement process. Here, humans actually step in to help shape its behavior. They show it examples of helpful, honest, and well-mannered responses, essentially steering it away from toxic or unhelpful ones. So, stage 1 gives the machine its knowledge and its language. Stage 2 is what gives it its manners and its helpfulness. And this brings us to arguably the biggest misconception out there, and we really need to strip the perceived humanity away from the AI for a moment. When the AI writes back to you and says, "I think," or "I believe," it is absolutely crucial to understand that it does not actually think or believe anything. It has no feelings, it has no self-awareness, it has zero understanding of meaning in the way that you or I do. It is simply producing the words that would most likely appear in a helpful response. It uses the phrase "I think" purely because that is how helpful humans happen to phrase things in the massive pile of data it was trained on.
So, the crucial point is understanding both the magic and the limit of this technology. The magic is that pure mathematical prediction, when executed at this enormous scale, produces an output that genuinely, remarkably resembles human reasoning. It looks and feels exactly like it's thinking. But the limit is that underneath it all, it's still just predicting. It is a brilliant statistical parlor trick, and understanding this fundamental reality perfectly bridges the gap between why the AI seems so incredibly smart one moment and why it can confidently state completely false things the next.
Which leads us directly to a phenomenon you have likely heard of: hallucination. Sometimes an AI will confidently tell you something that is just wildly, undeniably wrong: a fake historical fact, a completely made-up source, or an invented detail. Now, why does this happen? Well, remember, the model isn't looking things up in a factual database. It is simply predicting what sounds like a correct answer based on patterns. Usually, the most likely sounding answer happens to also be the true one, which is why the tool is so incredibly useful to us. But sometimes, the most plausibly sounding continuation is just factually false. When the AI gives you a false fact, it is very easy to feel deceived or tricked. But it's really important to realize that the AI is not lying to you. Lying requires intent. Lying requires knowing what the truth is and actively choosing to say something else. The AI has absolutely no built-in mechanism to know truth from fiction. It is merely a brilliant, highly capable assistant blindly predicting the next word. It's not a truth-telling oracle. It's simply doing the only job it knows how to do, and sometimes the statistical dice roll just lands on a prediction that is completely factually wrong. And this brilliantly illustrates the best way to think about the system. Imagine a person who has read almost everything ever written in human history, but they remember absolutely none of the specific facts exactly. Instead, they have just absorbed the patterns of how humans write and how human ideas flow. Ask them anything, and they will produce a fluent, confident answer built entirely from those patterns. Most of the time, it's highly useful because human knowledge is baked right into those patterns. But occasionally, they'll fill a gap with something that merely sounds right. That is exactly what you are talking to. It's not a database, it's not a mind. It is a pattern completion engine of extraordinary power. Now, why does understanding this mechanical reality actually matter for you? Because knowing how the machine works fundamentally transforms you from someone treating it like a magic 8-ball into a power user effectively wielding a tool. When you know it's a pattern completion engine, you quickly realize that how you ask the question completely dictates the quality of the pattern it completes. Clearer, more precise prompts give it far better patterns to latch onto. You also understand exactly why it is so brilliant at drafting, summarizing, and rephrasing, but why you absolutely must double-check and verify its facts. You have to respect its massive capabilities while clearly acknowledging its blind spots. Zooming out, we really need to look at the bigger picture here. This one deceptively simple idea, predict the next word, at a massive scale, is arguably one of the most consequential ideas of our time. From this single repetitive task has emerged a technology that can write essays, code complex software, act as a personalized tutor, translate languages in real time, and create entirely new content. The fact that so much world-altering capability stems from something so conceptually simple is exactly what makes it so profound. It is quite literally reshaping the modern world right in front of our eyes. So the next time you boot up an AI chatbot and it dazzles you with a deeply thoughtful, well-reasoned answer, you're going to know the exact truth behind the magic. You know it isn't thinking, you know it is just predicting. But it is doing it so remarkably well that the line between prediction and genuine thought is really starting to blur. Which leaves us with a fascinating and maybe slightly unsettling question to sit with. If pure mathematical prediction can already do all of this today, what exactly happens when it gets even better?